hello in the chat. The small but mighty group of us that are here. I hope you enjoy the 8 versions of me. I'm going to tap out once we start to come back. I do want to say thank you for joining us on a great American Day. We can never again say that a woman has not been the Vice President of the United States. We have a woman as the Vice President of the United States. I cried. I was talking on the phone with my mother. She cried too. So welcome. Thank you for joining us today. This is going to be recorded, so we'll go over it again later. I'm going to do the intro real quick, and then I'm going to tap out so you don't see 8 versions of me and sign back in with just the one version. I think might be easier. That having been said, today is Pop YS Live for January. It's our first January session. Woo! For those of you that are not familiar with Pop YS Live, it is our monthly continuing education series. I created it last year because I wanted something every month for us to be able to talk about a topic that was both really current or that addressed some issue in youth services. So it is about in practice things. It's about programming. It's about pretty much a pop, hence the name, of continuing education. And one of the focuses I really wanted to do for 2021 was to talk to in-practice librarians about what they did and how they worked. And I thought that would be really helpful. And I also thought it would be a fun way to keep this series being more than just my voice. Although, to quote Bono, I like the sound of my own voice. I didn't give anyone else a choice. Which is one of my favorite U2 lyrics. So, but more than just hearing me constantly, nonstop. So kicking us off is our speaker today, and she's coming to us all the way from Colorado, Mary. She's going to give us a quick wave, and then I'm going to turn everything over to her. I'll sign back on at the end, not in these 8 other versions. I'll sign back on at the end. Sam and I will be keeping an eye on the chat. Sam's housekeeping note that she wants to give you is please make sure that you let her know what your first and last name is so that you can get credit for this. My housekeeping note is we'll be keeping an eye on chat, but Mary has left time at the end for questions. So if you have questions, you can put them in the chat or you can save them at the end and put them in chat then. But Mary won't really be watching chat because she will be presenting. So Sam and I will be doing that. My other housekeeping note is I'll hop back on at the end to tell you this. This will be recorded so that when you want to watch it again and share it with the other people in your library, you will be able to do that. We'll save it on the archives page and in Iowa Learns. Ta-da! That all having been said, I'm going to read from my intro. That's the other good part about not having a background. You can actually see when I hold things up instead of making them disappear. So our speaker today, coming all the way from Colorado, is my pal, Mary. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about her, and then I'm going to tell you why I selected her for this presentation. And she was so kind enough to do it for us. So Mary, I'm going to mess up your last name again. Let's try it one more time.
Cooner.
Mary Cooner. Mary Cooner has worked as a librarian serving children and their caregivers for more than 21 years. She's a founding member of the Colorado Libraries for Early Literacy and has worked specifically in early literacy skills building for 15 years. In 2019, she served as chair for the ALSC, which is the Association for Library Services to Children, Excellent in Early Learning Digital Media in its inaugural year award. And prior to that, she helped create the criteria that would be used to evaluate the nominated media. Currently, she's an early literacy librarian at Arapahoe Libraries, where she facilitates learning on the go programs that serve 200 children monthly with storytime, early learning, and at-home extension activities. She hopes that someday you will see one of her stories on your library's picture book shelves. I have no doubt of that. And I also want to tell you, so part of the reason I asked Mary to do this for us, and she so kindly agreed, was because she is really one of the, she's one of the best early literacy storytime librarians I've ever seen. Every time I've ever seen her present, I've been like, oh my gosh, that just like blew my mind. I've had galaxy brain over it. But also because the way that she talks about early literacy and digital media is super important and critical, and I think you're all going to get a lot out of that. And so that's why I wanted to ask her today. Mary, thank you so much for doing this. It really is an honor to have you here. I do consider you one of my like storytime models, and I'm so excited to have you share with everybody today. And so I'm going to tap out now and then come right back, and I'm going to turn it over to you. Sam, did I forget anything?
Just no, sounds good.
Okay.
Or good luck coming back.
Thank you, Angie. Wow, that was an amazing introduction. I am really, really grateful. And Angie is definitely one of my heroes in the library world as well. I'll say that before she disappears. So I was really, really honored when she asked me to present this to you all. The last time I presented this was in October. I don't know if any of you were able to attend the Colorado Libraries for Early Literacy annual conference. It was virtual this year, and so we were able to invite folks from all over the world, in fact, to attend. So I did give this same presentation I've made a few tweaks at that event, and that's where Angie first saw it. I also want to say that I do have an Iowa connection. I just realized that I should probably tell you that I did graduate from Grinnell College a very long time ago, 1993. So I don't know if there's any Grinnell librarians here, but if so, I'd love to say hello. So I loved Iowa. I don't know why Iowa, sometimes people disparage it, but I thought Iowa was beautiful and I really was happy to be there. So I'm going to share my screen with you now so we can get into this presentation because I know we don't have a ton of time. And as you know, you are here for a presentation on media mentorship in the age of COVID. I also have to just do a little bit of adjustment with my screen so that I can see my notes at the same time. I've got this like a half and half screen thing going on here. Some of the norms for this presentation, I think you probably already know these things, but I ask you to keep your video off, microphones off, type any comments in the chat box, and although I might ask you for to give me your comments because I do have some questions for you that I'd like you to chime in on. And I would also like to let you know that my pronouns are she, her, and hers. And we'll start with a little bit of an introduction. You already had an introduction about me, but I'll give you a little bit more. This is a picture of my first virtual story time that I did back in April, I believe. So I know we've all gone to the virtual model. And one of my coworkers' children playing her ukulele along with me. So I've been doing this quite a while, 21 years. I'm currently an early literacy librarian with Arapahoe Libraries. And I believe all of this Angie already said, so I'm not going to dwell on any of this. At any rate, I've come to a lot of knowledge about this subject. And like a lot of things in early literacy and early learning, I think a lot of us learn on the job. And all of this has just come for me from being interested in child development and learning how kids learn and how to empower parents, which I feel is my part of my job is to, and a big part of my job, and I think a big part of all of our jobs is to empower parents and help them be able to make the best choices for their children and give their children the best start in life. So here is our agenda for today. We are going to talk about what media mentorship is in general, why I believe librarians should be media mentors, and to reassure you that yes, you can be a media mentor even if you don't feel super secure in technology. We're going to go over what the experts are saying now about screen time. We're going to talk about those best practices that the experts tell us versus the reality of our world today and using screens, because there has to be some balance. And then we're going to talk about ways you can evaluate early learning media yourselves. I'll give you some tools that you can use and that you can share with parents also so they can make the best choices for their children. Finally, some other ways we can advocate and help parents with digital media beyond just answering their questions. And then we'll have some time hopefully at the end for questions and sharing. All right, getting into the meat of this, and I don't have the chat box up, so if Angie and Sam, if anyone does have a question that needs to be answered immediately, please do feel free to pop in and let me know.
Okay, I'm keeping an eye on it.
Wonderful, thank you. And I do have a couple spots in here where I would like you to, I will ask the attendees a question, and I'd love to hear what people are saying. So I will have a pause at that point. So first, what is media mentorship? I first heard the phrase when this white paper came out from ALSC, the Association of Library Service to Children, in 2015. And the white paper recognized the changing nature of libraries and librarians' roles. As you know, we've always dealt in books But more recently, our role has changed a little bit as we provide advisory services in things other than just books. We have media, we have DVDs, we have music, and we also provide access to media, other media like digital media. So our role has changed a bit. And as practitioners serving youth, we have to roll with the times and learn about these new media so we can advocate for children and their families. I like this definition of media mentorship that we have here, that a media mentor provides recommendations to meet a family's stated or implied needs based on authoritative recommendations. Just the same as we would do with any book recommendations. What our families need, we will provide authoritative, accurate recommendations. But what I like about this sentence, the second sentence, that it emphasizes it's up to the family to use the recommendations to make their own decisions. It is based on patron need centers, but ultimately our patrons decide and make the best choices for themselves and their families. Our job is to guide and to provide information and help our parents make those best choices that they can. Our job is not to prescribe, not to tell them what they should or shouldn't be doing in terms of screen time, media choices. Just like we're not going to say, oh, your kid really should not take home a comic book because that's not quote unquote real reading. And I could go off on a rant about that, but I won't right now because I would never say that. We're not going to say, oh, you shouldn't let your kid play Fortnite or whatever because it's not good. That's our role, is to provide the resources and the information and the recommendations. That's what being a media mentor means to me. All right. So I would like to hear from you now. Why do you believe that librarians, or do you not believe that librarians should be media mentors? I would love if you would comment in the chat, and maybe Sam or Angie could tell me what people are saying, but do you have any opinions about whether or not librarians should be media mentors? Why or why not?
I am keeping an eye on the chat. Angie is in the room, but I'm at the moment having trouble giving her microphone rights. So
Okay.
I will kind of be on board here to read off as people are signing in.
Absolutely.
This concept of media mentorship is a relatively new one to me, and I haven't spent a ton of time in youth services. So I'm interested to see what other youth services folks are here to answer this question.
That ALSC white paper is just 5 years old, so it's fairly recent for all of us. And the Excellence in Early Learning Digital Media Award is literally, we've had two awards so far. This year, next week will be the third instance of it being awarded, so it's very new.
Yeah, so we've had one person chime in and say, I don't know about media mentors, so this will be great. So we might have a few, another person saying also not sure. So we might have, some folks who are, what can we say, highly impressionable.
Well, that makes me glad that you came to this presentation. I'm glad that you're interested in learning more, and then you can decide for yourself what you believe. But, I'm firmly on the side of librarians can and should be media mentors. So
I do like what one of our colleagues here says, Christine, I thought it was part of our job, especially now during COVID.
Well, I agree with that, actually. But I know that's been challenging for some folks to realize. So I 100% agree with that.
Mm-hmm. Another person relating it to kind of book recommendations, like you said, we are the point of contact for those who need guidance. Mm-hmm. The world is changing so quickly. A lot of things are online and virtual.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think these are all great reasons, and I think I might have some of the same ones. I'll show you what my feelings are about this. First of all, it is actually one of the core competencies listed on ALSC's core competencies for youth librarians document now. So it is something that the Association of Library Service to Children believes is something that all youth librarians should be able to do. And as somebody said in the chat, it's another form of advisory. And that is absolutely our job. It's just advisory of a different form of media from print media. Where it is not our job is to impose our values on our families or our caregivers. I do I'm part of a group called Storytime Underground that I'm sure a lot of you are involved in. I'm one of the joint chiefs, we call ourselves, so one of the administrators of that group. And for a long time, there was a member of that group who, anytime anyone started to talk about any kind of media, they would insist that we should not, under any circumstances, advocate for any kind of media use by children, that we should firmly stick to the side of children should be reading, the screen time is bad, and that it wasn't our job then at any point to recommend media to families. And I don't understand that mindset. It is not about our values. It is, as the Media Mentorship white paper stated, it is about us recommending and guiding families to make the best choices for themselves and their family. Additionally, real talk, screens are not going anywhere, especially this year. I mean, I think I started working on this presentation before COVID, and then screens were not going anywhere, and now screens are really not going anywhere. So not for a while. So we need to, again, help our families make those best practice decisions. And this is absolutely something that we'll hear later a little bit more about, that families are worried about and families are thinking about. Additionally, it's another form of literacy. So children need to be able to learn how to navigate online media, digital media successfully, and to think critically about it. So that is something that has always been our job, as promoting literacy of different forms. And digital literacy is another important form of literacy. Also, technology has its benefits. It's not all bad. Obviously, we're using it right now to learn. So technology gets a bad rap. You see headlines all the time yelling about screen time, that it's like the worst thing ever. And it just makes parents incredibly afraid for their children who spend any time in front of any screen. But what the reality is that it's more about what kids are doing on screens than the time they are spending on screens. And we'll get into that a little bit later more because an author named Lisa Guernsey has more to say about that. So, and we've already talked about media literacy. So that's an important thing for families to be able to navigate. So next, I want to show you a slide that I just added recently, because I know I've heard from some people that this is a really intimidating thing. People think, I can't be a media mentor. I can't tell a WhatsApp from a fortnight. Being a media mentor doesn't mean that you're a technology expert. I certainly am not. I could not fix your computer if my life depended on it. I can't always answer those heavy-duty tech questions that the tech specialists in my libraries have to answer. In fact, when I'm doing chat reference right now, I tend to, if I see a question come in and it's about somebody downloading something onto their Kindle, I cross my fingers that one of our tech specialists will answer it so I don't have to. I can do it if I have to, but it's much easier if one of them does. So I don't pretend that I know everything about technology. But here's the thing: you can be a media mentor. So I want to start this with, first of all, yes, you can. You can be a media mentor. You are a trusted resource to your patrons. So this is something they are looking to you to do. So even if we think we don't feel super comfortable with advisory, like I'm not super comfortable with adult advisory because I primarily read children's books, but I am a librarian, so people ask me for recommendations. And here's the thing: I'm a library professional. I know where to look. I don't know everything. I know where to look. And I think that's equally true with media mentorship as it is with book advisory. And I hope that at the end of this presentation, you feel like you have some of the good basics around screen time and digital media advisory, but you also have those tools so that you can guide parents and caregivers in their choices. And one of the mottos of my library, our tagline that we use, is "Let's find out." And I think if we all have that attitude, it goes a long way. If a caregiver or patron comes up to you and says, I'm really not sure about this particular piece of media that my child really wants to watch. What do you think about it? Well, you're obviously not going to know everything about every piece of digital media that exists, just like we don't read every book. However, you can take a let's find out attitude and go together to look and find the information and help that caregiver make an informed choice. So another reason why I believe being a media mentorship is important for us right now in this day and age, I want to just share with you. I pulled all of these images off of Instagram yesterday. So I looked up the hashtag screen time. And these are the messages parents and caregivers are hearing every day. I wonder if you notice anything about them. There's comments like, I should probably send the YouTuber who's raising my son right now some sort of compensation. Acknowledging that, yes, children are spending a lot of time online right now. A question, why am I'm not dealing with my child's screen time habits? Implying that this is something I should be thinking about, or I'm a bad parent if I don't. The screen time and health image, blue light toxicity, disruption of circadian rhythm, poor sleep quality, depression, obesity, poor physical skills. I mean, in the New York Times headline, children's screen time has soared in the pandemic, alarming parents and researchers, which a parent decided to fix. And I couldn't find the original source of the fixed image, so I'm looking for that, and I will add a citation when I can find it. I did see that floating around Instagram, but as you will probably notice about all these images, they are alarmist. They make parents feel scared and guilty and ashamed for the amount of time their children are spending on screens. These are the messages they are getting from our media right now. And what good is that going to do any parent to make them feel guilty about what they're doing? I think that's not our job, definitely. Our job is to help arm them with information about what the experts are saying and how they can make best decisions without feeling like they are ruining their child or it's the end of the world if they let their kid have a little more screen time, or if their child is spending all day on the screens, because that's the reality we live in right now. A lot of children are doing virtual learning and they're getting far more screen time than is recommended, but that is real life. So I think we can go into this armed with a lot of great information that we can share with families and, again, let them make their own decisions. So let's talk about screen time and what the experts say. I'm sure many of you have heard that the American Academy of Pediatrics has put out recommendations. These get talked about a lot. This is kind of the gold standard for screen time recommendations. What do the experts say? This document, I believe, came out in 2016, and their recommendations stated that you should avoid digital media except for video chatting for children younger than 18 to 25 months. Now, I want to clarify also that this 2016 statement came out, was a revision of a previous statement that had been completely misinterpreted by the media to say that the experts were saying under 2, no screen time, 0, it's bad, nothing, ever, awful, and that's, I think, where we get the idea that parents think that they're going to ruin their child if they let them spend any time in front of any screen before age 2. They revised this statement in 2016 because of that, because it had been completely misinterpreted, and changed their wording slightly. This is a recommendation. They say it clearly. It's a recommendation. It's a best practice. It is not avoid. Your child is going to lose all their fine motor skills. It's the worst thing ever if they look at any screen. Their exact recommendations are video chatting is fine. That's the way a lot of children are connecting with their grandparents, with other family members, especially during the time of COVID. I think it's great to let parents know that, it's absolutely fine if your child is FaceTiming with grandma. That's a great thing to do. There's a children's picture book that relates to that called Tea with Grandpa. And it's a lovely little book that states, shows a child and his grandpa having tea together. And at the end, we find out that they're actually doing it over FaceTime. So for ages 18 to 24 months, it's best if you're using that media with your child. And I think that's best practice we've all learned in terms of play. Children learn best when they are interacting with a human being who loves and cares about them. They don't learn best through passive media absorption. Just like when we read aloud to children, if they are able to interact with us, if we are a human being sharing that book with them, if it's somebody who loves and cares for them, they're going to get far more out of it. So they recommend that high quality media should be used with the child. Avoid solo media use. Again, it says avoid, not don't ever, this is the worst thing ever, your child is going to be scarred for life. It says avoid. For ages 2 to 5, no more than an hour a day. Okay. They recommend, again, co-viewing with your children, which is watching together, talking about what you're seeing, helping them to understand, and helping them connect it to the world, the real world that they live in. Again, notice that nowhere it says the world will end if you let your kid watch an extra half hour of Sesame Street so you can get a shower. Does not say that. All right. Another statement that came out is from the Fred Rogers Center, which is it's a center that was created to study children's media and young children, and NACI, which is the National Association of the Education of Young Children. Among other things that their statement says, when technology is used intentionally, it can be a useful tool. There you go. We're acknowledging that technology is not all bad, but limits are important, and tech has the possibility of enhancing without replacing other forms of play. Again, acknowledging that technology has its place in our lives, and it's important to have that balance. And they point out that equitable access is important. It is important for all children to have access to different forms of technology. And I think that connects to what we talked about earlier about digital literacy being important for children. We all need to know how to use the internet so we can fill out a job application later. So striving for equity in access to technology is also important. And they recognize that there is the need for more research because honestly, the jury is still out on the long-term effects of technology used by children. All right, so this is what the experts say. Now, I forgot to point out at the beginning of this that I do have a handout, which I will share with Angie so she can get it to all of you. And I have a link at the end of this presentation that contains the links to all of these documents. So you can read them in full, make your own decision, see what you think. So no need to take my word for it, as LeVar Burton says. You can read them yourselves and decide. And so I've got links to these other articles and lots of other resources for you so that you can find them again. So now let's talk about reality. Let's talk about real life right now. This is from an article in the New York Times that came out in April of last year. So well into the COVID stay-at-home pandemic. And this expert on children and media said, there is no science behind this right now. If you're looking for specific time limits, then I would say, don't be on it all day. I think that's good practice for all of us, honestly. I am guilty of that sometimes. So she's saying, look, this is real. This is what we're dealing with right now. Just try to be thoughtful about it. So the reality of media mentorship in the age of COVID, best practices versus the reality, is that, in fact, the American Academy of Pediatrics came out with new guidelines after the COVID pandemic started. So I've included the link to their new guidelines in your handout as well. In those guidelines, they do not give any specific time limits. That's acknowledging the real world we live in right now. However, they do state that limits are important. And as the timeline of social distancing is uncertain, try to stick to routines. Make sure technology use does not take the place of sleep, physical activity, reading, reflective downtime, or family connection. They are recommending balance and moderation and, making sure you find time every day to get outside if the weather's good, but run around, do something as a family, get to bed on time. So, have regular meals. So they're saying, don't worry so much about how much time your child is spending on the screen, but make sure it's balanced, that their life has balance and they're able to do in-person things with the people that they love and they're getting other forms of exercise and they're not sitting in front of a screen all day. There's also an article that's in your handouts that's from UNICEF. The statement that they released is called "Growing Up in a Connected World." And they state that while a small group of children will inevitably encounter adverse experiences when they use digital technology, this is not directly related to the time they spend online. Rather, when considering such experiences, more attention should be paid to what children do online, the content they encounter, and their life environment and support networks in general. So it's all about everything together. You know, what are you doing online? Are children practicing digital safety? It's not so much about the time, because everyone yells about screen time, but it's more about what they're doing, the support system they have at home, who they have around them to talk to, what kind of relationships do they have around them. And they mentioned that the phrase screen time is problematic because it seems like all screens are bad. It reduces the debate to a black and white issue when it's actually much more nuanced than that. And again, we as librarians can really make sure that we are being non-judgmental in this time of COVID, when a lot of parents are struggling with media use and screen time. As I said before, we don't judge a family's choice in books, so why would we do it with their media? It's our job to advise and not prescribe. And I will say, I'm curious to know if any of you have encountered the same thing I have. As in my 21 years as a librarian, do you find that parents come and confess their sins to you about reading and about screen use? On more than one occasion, I have had a caregiver come up to me and say, oh, you know, I really let my kid watch, you know, too much of this, or, oh, I let my kid watch YouTube, or I let my kid watch videos on whatever. They come and say it in such a way that they're really embarrassed and like I'm going to judge them for it. And I think librarians sometimes have a reputation for being kind of judgy, even though we know we aren't really. And so I think that if we can find a way to say, you know what, I understand that. There's nothing wrong with that. It's okay. It's okay. And here's what the experts are saying, and you work within that. And I think we need to be giving families a lot of grace right now. I don't have kids, so you know, and I know I spend way too much time on screens. But I understand that being a parent right now is really hard. Being a caregiver is really hard. So any kind of grace we can give families while giving them the tools they need to make informed choices is important. And one of those tools that we can use is a family media plan. And I've included a link to a document in your handout. You can suggest that to families if they're trying to find an active way to work within screen time for their family. And what it does is it allows the whole family to come together and agree to what their rules are around media use. You can say that we will, you know, you can put in your family media plan that we're going to all agree that we will not have our phones at dinner time. You know, we're going to all agree that the screens go off, TV goes off at 8 p.m. You know, we're going to agree that as a family that we don't have television in our bedroom. So each family can decide what's best for them, and letting the family make that choice together really gives children much more buy-in. And it also then allows the grown-ups to think a little bit more about their own media use. You know, and I think if the children have to make those limitations, the grown-ups should have to do it as well. The New York Times article that I mentioned earlier, that there was that alarmist headline about screen time and addiction. I haven't had the chance to read it, but I hear it's primarily about teenagers and their addiction to media, and how it's starting arguments with their parents, and it's making them hard to communicate. And I think that if a family is able to start when the child is young, coming to an agreement together about their media use, it's going to make it easier when they're older to set some more of those limits, because, you know, the child has more buy-in, the child is used to this kind of discussion, the child understands that there are limits, because, you know, it's really hard when a child is a teenager to put limits on things if you never have before. And I've heard also, whoops, went the wrong way. I have heard from early learning speakers that children have much more buy-in in rules and decisions if they are able to make those with the parent, if they are able to sit down and figure out, solve a problem together. So that's why a family media plan can be useful. Another way we can help parents be thoughtful about their media use is to give them the tools they need to evaluate media. So we are going to talk about that, and I'm going to give you some great resources that you can use when you are evaluating media for your library, for your library's website, and when you are helping parents make those choices. So that's where we're going to head now. Are there any questions that have come up so far about what I've shared? It's a lot of information, I know. Nothing so far?
I'm not sure if Angie is unmuting here, but I haven't seen anything in the chat. I think people are just kind of soaking it all in. We did have one person comment when you were talking through, this sort of feeling like people come with their confessions.
Yes.
That folks, I think, can relate to that. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think we hear those confessions when it comes to media, but also books, Well, my kid only wants to read graphic novels. And my response to that is, woohoo, they're reading, awesome, they're reading.
Yes. No, I think that's exactly right.
Yeah, so we definitely have to fight that image that we are the arbiters of what is good and what is educational. Maybe it was that way, but we are no longer the gatekeepers. We are just helping families make the best choices for the family with our knowledge about early literacy, early learning, and best practices. Mm-hmm. All right, so getting into, this is another, sorry, I forgot I had a second slide about best practices versus reality for families. Another thing that you can do is encourage families, if they're worried about their child's screen time, especially their young child, is encourage co-viewing. Co-viewing as a term just basically means parent or a caregiver and a child sitting down together to watch something together and talking about it. Again, we know from our early learning and early child development that children learn best through interaction with a human being and not just passive absorption of what's on the screen. So co-viewing is a great way to sit down together and talk about what you're seeing, and then you can also, find out what your kid is thinking about what they're seeing. So co-viewing is a great way to, if you're going to have to spend a lot of more time on screens, if you're, able to. Obviously, that's hard for a lot of people. Additionally, we can suggest other forms of media. If we have a family that's coming in to pick up a Peppa Pig DVD, we can maybe say, hey, did you know we have books about Peppa Pig too? So you can, guide them into not only our digital media, but also our print media. So, suggest that you have those things. I often find that kids get very excited about when they're getting a movie about something that you also have books about it. Another thing, if parents are concerned about their child always wanting to use their phone and play on their phone, think about using digital media in a new way. It doesn't have to mean playing on the phone, doesn't have to mean playing a game or watching a YouTube video. It can mean there are drawing apps. You can download a drawing app, and if your child really wants to play on your phone, let them draw. So they're actually using their fine motor skills, poking and touching and drawing. So they're getting to use your screen, but they're actually working on a different kind of skill. Get something where that allows you to put stickers on photographs. So you're looking at family photos and they're putting different stickers on them not real stickers, digital stickers. I think those exist. So that's another thing we can suggest to parents. And encourage parents to be mindful of their own media use. Now, again, that's tricky. I wouldn't bring this up unless a parent specifically is asking us for these kinds of recommendations or guidelines, because you don't want that parent to feel attacked. You don't want them to feel like, again, that you're judging them. I need to be mindful of my own media use. I think you can always couch it in that you're thinking about this yourself. And, hey, we as adults don't always realize how much time we're spending on our screens. So encouraging them to be mindful of their own media use and how their children see that, because children notice that, well, if you can be at dinner table on your phone and you have to take business calls right now, why can't I? And at the end of the day, encourage our caregivers to be kind to themselves. We are all very brand new to this, to the idea of online learning all day, working from home all day. Many of us are in unfamiliar territory, and so we need to give ourselves grace, and we need to give our caregivers grace, and we need to encourage them to give themselves grace. And an article that I've shared in your handout that you can look at from the Child Mind Institute said, quote, if you can give yourself a B- at the end of the day with a few meltdowns from your kids, but everyone's fed and getting some sleep, you're doing pretty well. There you go. So again, give yourself a little bit of a break. Do the best you can. So now we're going to get into media evaluation. How do you look at some media, think critically about it, and I've just lost my train of thought. How do you think critically about it, and how do you evaluate it? So I'm going to give you a few different ways to do that. The first one is from Lisa Guernsey, who has a book out called Tap, Click, Read, and she talks about using the 3 C's. Now, this deals with children's media use in general and not a way to judge specific apps or games, but a way to judge just different types of media. So she talks about looking at the content. What is it? What is it? Is it something that stimulates your child? Is it something that's developmentally appropriate? And she's got a little handout that I have linked to in your handout that allows a parent to look at these different aspects and give themselves a grade. Like they can add +1 point for, is the media designed to promote conversation or help build language skills? Well, that's a +1. Is it scary or troubling to the child? That's a -2. So you can actually use a little bit of math to evaluate your media with her handout. So that's looking at the content. The next category is context. How is the child using the media? When are they using that media? Is it at bedtime? Is it with a parent or child or caregiver? Is it during meals? What about your own media use as a parent? So for that one, she's got questions to ask like, do you have moments in which you are jointly watching or playing with your child? That's a +2. But if you tune out and miss cues from your child when you're using your own devices or screen media, that's a -2. So again, that's looking at how screen time and media used in general. And the final one she has you look at is the child. A caregiver, a parent, is the one who knows that child best. And so they can think about, is the media the child is using assisting them to develop motor skills, social skills, or language development? That's a +1. Some apps do that. And a +1 is, are you engaging with your child while they're engaged with what's on the screen? Are you asking questions? And does the child act or talk about what they see or play with it? Are they taking what they are seeing and learning out into the real world and using it again? That's also a +1. So I think that's a useful tool. That's one way to look at the media that we're using. Another way is the E-AIMS model created by 0 to 3. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the website 0 to 3, which is a wonderful child development website. If you've never spent any time there, I highly recommend it. I've learned so much from reading their articles and just trolling through that site. The model they have created is E-AIMS, which stands for engaging. Is the media obviously is engaging to the child? Are they actively involved in it? That's the second one. Give them something to do, or can they actually, it's not just passive, are they able to do something with this media? Is it meaningful? Whoops, and I just jumped right ahead. Whoops, too much clicking. Is it meaningful? Does it reflect their life? Do they see themselves in the app? That's why diversity in the characters is important. Can they connect with it? Is it developmentally appropriate? So it's not going to be meaningful if it's too hard to do, they're going to want to give it up. And if it's too easy, they're going to get bored. And finally, is it social? Are they engaging with the content outside of the app? You know, can they take what they've learned or what they've done, and are they, you know, pretending, if they're using a Three Little Bears story app, are they pretending to be the Three Little Bears afterwards? If they're learning how to count in the app, are they actively practicing that outside of the app? So that's one way you can evaluate media using this e-AIMS model. And the handout that you see on your screen is also included in the handout links that I've got for you. And I think it's a wonderful one. If you just wanted to have something printed out for parents to take home, this is a great one. It's just got that little flow chart that they can look at and use to think about the media. Another way I want to tell you about evaluating media is, first I want to let you know about the Excellence in Early Learning Digital Media Award that I had the good fortune to be a part of. We first awarded this in 2019. And so in the year prior to that, we actually created the criteria, and it recognizes the most distinguished, digital media created for an early learning audience by a producer based in the United States. So it could be apps, it could be websites, it could be DVDs, it could be shows. We deliberately left it quite open because digital media is constantly changing what constitutes digital media. So we wanted to leave it pretty broad. And when we created the criteria, we specifically stated it was media for children aged 2 to 8. And that was us recognizing what the American Academy of Pediatrics says about media use before age 2, that it's really not recommended. So we wanted to acknowledge that. One of the important things that we said when we created the criteria was that we wanted to make sure it was something that allowed for meaningful joint media engagement. Again, we wanted to acknowledge that children learn best through having a caring adult with them, co-viewing, actively engaging in the media together. We wanted a digital media that acknowledges that and somehow reflects that. So when we're talking about tools to use to help parents and to help ourselves evaluate media, I wanted to share with you one of the resources that we used when creating the criteria for the Excellence in Early Learning Digital Media Award. We used this thing called KidMap, Kids Inclusive and Diverse Media Action Project. And you've got a link to this website on your handout as well. This actually is geared toward content creators, so those who are making the apps for children. But the checklist that they've got a great checklist included on their website that you as an evaluator can use, things to look at when you're looking at your media. And it includes looking for diversity in the media. You know, does it show a variety of children, of languages? Does it include universal design elements, meaning is it accessible to lots of children with lots of different abilities? Does it have audio components as well as digital components or visual components? How are those audio components well done? You know, is it something that you can hear properly? You know, is it hard to hear? Is there a text? Is there a text option for those who don't hear? What does the art look like? Is the art appropriate? Is it well done? So lots of different elements that this group is recommending that content creators use when creating things for children. Now, this project is actually based on a rubric created by a librarian in Alaska named Claudia Haynes. I've included her rubric in your handout as well. And her rubric is great for libraries to use because it includes looking at every child ready to read practices and how they're reflected in the app. So she's even thinking further about read, talk, sing, write, play, and how are those incorporated into the app. All right, so I'm going to get going a little bit more quickly now because I know we've only got about 10 minutes left and I do want to leave a little time for questions. And I know this is a ton of content for you to absorb and think about. So, you know, you absolutely can ask me questions or contact me later afterwards with questions. Some other places you can use to get great reviews of resources so you don't have to be evaluating every piece of media. Others have done it for you, so you can use these resources to find great apps and digital media. Carissa's list is a list created by a librarian in the Madison Public Library, and she's constantly reviewing apps, and it's really, really useful. And she also looks at them for their early literacy, their early literacy components. The Children's Technology Review is a paid subscription service, but if you have media buyers in your library, somebody in your library may subscribe to that. We have I think we have a subscription through, I think, our media librarian. And so when they get the copy each month, they forward it to a bunch of us. So find out if anyone in your system subscribes to Children's Technology Review and ask them if they can share what they get every month. Common Sense Media. Many of you may have heard of this organization. When I first started as a librarian, when it first existed, it was very, very judgy. It was very much coming at media reviews from a very specific and very biased lens. It has improved 100%. It not only includes professional reviews from professional reviewers looking at media, books, movies, all kinds of things. It also includes space for parents to write reviews and for kids to write reviews, which I think is very rare, that we actually get to see how kids feel about these things. So that's, and it provides quite a bit of information in their reviews. They have a section in their reviews called What to Talk to Your Kids About, which I think is wonderful because it acknowledges that if a parent is using this with their child, they're going to get more out of it. Sorry, I'm looking ahead at my notes because there are a lot of things I want to make sure I mention. So check out Common Sense Media. School Library Journal does app reviews. Again, you need to subscribe to it to have access to all of their reviews. But I imagine many libraries do subscribe to School Library Journal for the book reviews, so you probably have access to that. And a little plug to my own library's blog, because my colleague Molly does regular app reviews as well. So you have a link to all of these on the handout. One thing I do want to point out is that I don't think any of these, other than Children's Tech or Common Sense Media, specifically address privacy. Now that is something that parents and caregivers need to be thinking about when downloading apps for their children. What kind of information about your children are these apps collecting? How is it being used? What kind of information do you have to give them about your child in order to use the app? That is definitely something to be sensitive about. And good apps will actually make that pretty clear. They may have a thing to click on as you're a parent, and they'll write out what their privacy policy is. So, high quality apps for children will often list their privacy policy right there. So it's clear to parents what information is being collected and how it's being used, because I think that's very important to know. So something to recommend to families. Finally, here are a few app companies that are consistently making really good apps for parents and kids. PBS Kids has won the Excellence in Early Learning Digital Media Award the last 2 years. So they are doing an excellent job. And one thing that's really wonderful about them is that their apps generally have a specific section to click on if you're a parent or a caregiver, which gives ideas for how to take the app out into the real world, the information you're learning out into the real world, and continuing the learning beyond the screen. Tiny Bop as well has won the award a couple of times because it's more school-age children, the stuff they create. They create these wonderful science-based apps, and they're amazing, and they include curriculum guides, multiple languages. Fox and Sheep, I'm honestly not sure if Fox and Sheep is still making blogs. They were making wonderful storybook-based apps for a long time, and I'm not sure if Duck Duck Moose is still in business anymore either, but in the past they have made wonderful things. Toca Boca is definitely an app company you want to look at for really fun apps that are simple for young children to do, but also have a learning component. All right, so just a few recommended apps. So finally, what else can libraries do to support caregivers with online learning? Now, I wonder if, I know we're getting really close to the end, so I won't, you can tell me in the comments, but I'm not going to go through it right now. But if you have any ideas, I'd love to hear what you think. Beyond having these conversations when a parent brings it up to us, because that does happen. How can we more passively support caregivers without being judgy. So some of the ideas that I have and that I've heard from others are offering bite-sized tips when you have the opportunity. Just like we give early literacy tips, we can give digital media tips. You know, if in your story time you want to make a little comment about how children, you know, we know children learn best when they are working with a grown-up who cares about them. And the same goes for when you're using a screen. So if you're playing on an app together, try to sit down with your child and use it together. So you can drop those things in even when they're not asked for, when you have the opportunity. We are also helping caregivers and supporting caregivers when we offer curated apps and websites on our own website, because we're telling them, as a library, we think this is a good app. So that's, you know, we're putting our seal of approval on it. You can invite experts in to do virtual programs for you on screen time. So, you know, somebody else can give parents the news, but if you're able to do that, that's a wonderful thing. You can write blog posts for your website. So if people are interested in learning more about screen times, you can do that. You can share on your social media little bite-sized tips about media use, and also about parents giving themselves a little grace. Now, I have not tried this next one, but I heard it mentioned by somebody that it would be a useful thing for libraries to do. Provide training for caregivers on the software their children are using at school. I actually work with a Head Start in my area that did this before the kids started their online preschool. They provided online training for the caregivers on how to use the software that their kids were using, because not every parent is adept at using this stuff. And if we can help them understand how to use the tools that their children are using, I think it's incredibly valuable. And then, of course, we can support caregivers by providing those offline experiences, those non-screen time experiences for children, like make and takes, or, you know, a lot of us are doing right now, grab and go craft kits. So, you know, we are supporting not only their screen use, but also encouraging those offline activities as well. So that's a lot of information for all of you. And I think that's there's my last slide. So I'm happy to hear from you, any questions or comments you have, but also you are welcome to contact me directly. There is a link if you want to write it down to the handout that I have in Google Docs, but I will also send that to Angie so she can share it out with you as well. So you will have, if you click on this, go to this link, you'll have all the active links for all of the handouts. So that's everything I have. I know this is very long and we have 1 minute left.
Mary, thank you. Thank you. Okay, so thank you. So everybody, if you do have any quick questions, you can say them, you can ask them here now, but Mary would also love to hear from you. You can contact her directly. You can email her. She'd love to hear from you. And as per usual, this amazing handout that she's made that has all of this stuff in there, that's going to be available on the State Library website once we post the this webinar. And also, Sam, I don't know how it works in Iowa Learns. I don't know if you'll attach it in there or how it works. But if anybody has any questions, now's the time to kind of weigh in with this. Mary, this was great. It gave me a ton of ideas. You know, I love the idea of now, especially as a time that you could go over media plans. And the part I really want to emphasize too is like getting parents to understand. It's like saying, okay, we're all going to put our phones down at supper. We're all going to, just like we tell parents all the time, if you want your kids to be a reader, they have to see you reading. They have to see you reading things. It's the same exact thing. You cannot tell your kid, do not stay online 24 hours a day. I have to watch 8 hours of Supernatural. That's me. I've been watching a lot.
I know that's you. And also just acknowledging that as we are working from home, that our kids are seeing us being online all day long. So it's
and then for us to immediately say, no, it doesn't like that. And that was
there's going to be some cognitive dissonance there, and you need to acknowledge it as a parent that, you know, it doesn't make sense to kids.
I did read that New York Times article, and it was wild to me. There was a part in it where she was like, I told him, what are you going to do when you're a grown up and you get into a fight with your wife? Are you just going to go play Xbox to chill out? And I was like, yes, people do.
I mean, like, that sounds like a good thing to do.
Yes. Should he keep yelling at her? I mean, like, So, I also thought that New York Times article was garbage, but okay, everybody, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much to Mary. This was amazing. Everybody, you're going to get tons of information. I hope this has started you thinking. I also hope you'll take some time. I know a lot of you, I know you're all, I hope you'll take some time to explore some of these, the apps. Like Mary kind of talked about them at the end, but exploring some of the apps and some of the digital media and being familiar with it so you can share it with, I think that's really helpful. Mary, thoughts, feelings?
Agreed. I agree with that. Yeah, I think it's wonderful when you can give that, just like with how we read so much of the media or the books that we want to share, and it's easier to be really enthusiastic about something you've actually read yourself. Same thing with apps. Like I said, I don't have kids, but I have an iPad, so I download a lot of these things and play with them and try them out. So I can say to get parents and say, oh my God, this is amazing. You know, this is, and here's what it'll do, and here's some of the early learning things you'll use. But anytime you get the opportunity to just plug in a little bit of information about about digital media use in a non-judgmental way, take advantage of it.
And now they really need to hear that. I think that can really be a time where we can stand out and be the people who are just like, let's all kind of be present. And I like the reminders about grace. So thank you all. Thank you so much to Mary for doing this. Thank you for joining us on this historic, lovely day.